I was fully spoiled for the book. From the moment I saw this character show up on the page, he's just a walking red flag, and I can't help but wonder, is he one of the reasons why people don't like blonde male main characters? Welcome back to another video. In today's video we are going to be reading Romantasy and Only Romantasy. I'm actually filming this intro after I filmed the whole video because the original intro was kind of not the best, so we are refilming the intro. So I already know which books we are going to be reading in this video. So the first book that we're going to be reading in this video is A Court of Thorns and Roses, which I actually have the physical copy, which is right here behind me. You can actually see it. It's that one purple book, because this book has been sitting on my TBR for such a long time, I think 2023. And at the time I have the Portuguese translation and I have the old cover. Let me try and get it. So this is the old Brazilian cover for this book, but now it has been republished, not republished, but the newer editions of A Court of Thorns and Roses, it's in that classic, the famous red cover. But overall, the first thing you need to know about this book or reading this book in this vlog is that I started reading a Kotar knowing exactly what was going to happen, what was the main story arc in A Court of Thorns and Roses, because I did spoil the book for myself not many years ago, but a few years ago. I spoiled every single little bit of the book, or at least almost everything. There will be some things I'm going to let Bess Carroll, that was still reading the book, talk more about it, but I did go into this book being completely spoiled, and luckily, it's not that I don't care about spoilers, I actually like spoilers. But let's go to Carol reading this book and all my thoughts and feelings about Akodar, and oh, do I have them? Hello! So it's been a few days and I'm actually almost finishing reading A Court of Thorns and Roses. I'm on chapter 40, which means I have a little bit less than 100 pages to finish reading A Court of Thorns and Roses, and I have some thoughts and opinions about this book. A Court of Thorns and Roses is the first book in a series of 5 books. There will be another book that will be released soon. I'm not sure, I don't think there is still a release date for the other book, but the author announced that they already submitted the manuscript for its next book. But basically, in A Court of Thorns and Roses, we follow, in the first few books, I believe, we follow this young woman called Farah. She's around 19 years old. She was born in a very wealthy family, but her family went bankrupt, and now they live in this very small cottage, a very small house. Their family doesn't really have money for anything. They are really, really extremely poor. And Farah, she's the youngest sister. She has a father who has problems on his knee, and she has 2 older sisters that their life, they are used to living in the high society. But Farah, because she was really young when her family lost their fortune, she isn't really that used with the higher society, and also she's basically the one that's keeping her family afloat. She's the one that goes out and hunt and finds things that they can sell, or hunt animals that they can sell for money so they can survive. And one day Farah goes into this forest because the cottage that they live in is near the border between the human lands and this other land called Riffian, which is a land that is governed by fays, by this group of high fays, and there are also other fays living in this land. And one day in the middle of winter, while she's trying to hunt something so her family could have something to eat and so they wouldn't starve to death, she ends up killing this wolf, who ends up being a fey wolf. He's a fey that crossed this border and he was disguised as a wolf, and Farah just killed this wolf without knowing it was a fey. And then one day the High Lord of the court from this wolf shows up at her door and because allegedly there is this treaty where if a human kills a fae without being attacked by the fae first, the fae could take the human to the fairyland, or they could kill them. and this is all alleged. So Farah ends up being forced to move to the spring court, to the fairyland, and to live with this High Lord. And this romantasy is supposed to have a romance in there, and that's all I'm going to say without giving you spoilers. I'm going to repeat myself because I'm pretty sure I said this in the previous clip, but I went into this book knowing everything that will happen in the book. I was fully spoiled for the book and about a very major plot twist that will happen in the first part of the second book in the series. And I'm going to be completely honest, if I didn't know the spoilers and what was going to happen in the second book, I would be extremely disappointed and I would not be continuing on with the series. Because so far, if I went into this book knowing it was a romantasy, which would be the most likely case considering A Court of Thorns and Roses or ACOTAR is so popular and everyone advertises it as a romantasy, and this book is kind of like the OG romantasy, the book that popularized the term romantasy. So if I went into this book knowing there was going to be a romance, I would be extremely disappointed because the love interest in this book, Tamlin, he is a walking red flag. He's like Farah tried to paint the Chinese flag, but she forgot to paint the stars on it. That's Tamlin. And it's one of those moments where I look at it and I wonder, is it an age thing? But then I remind myself that a lot of people my age love this book. And actually, also this book was released in the 2010s and was intended for an audience that was in a young adult audience, people that were teenagers or early 20s in the 2010s, which is quite exactly me. This book, right now I don't think it's advertised as young adult anymore, but I am the intended audience for this book. And it's one of those things where I keep wondering, and I kind of worry for people that like Tamlin. And I'm not trying to offend anyone, but if you like Tamlin, if you genuinely like Tamlin, I think you need to look for some help, because from the moment I saw this character show up on the page, he's just a walking red flag. He has zero coping mechanism when it comes to emotion. He has zero emotion regulation. He has anger issues. He's constantly showing off his claws and reminding me of Wolverine. He's a walking red flag. He's like, Farah tried to paint the flag from Japan, but she made the circle a little bit too big, and that's Tamlin. And there were just so many red flags about this character, and I already know some of the things that will happen in the next book, and I think I can already see the signs of why that will happen, because Tamlin is just a walking red flag. Another thing about this book is that I talked about a little bit about it being a romantasy, but if I went into this book not knowing it was a romantasy, thinking it was a fantasy, I also would be very disappointed. But also, if I went into this book knowing it was a romantasy, I feel like even if I didn't have the spoilers, I would have figured out one of the plot twists of this book, of the story, because of the way Tamlin reacts, the way Tamlin acts quite easily. And if I went into this book knowing it was a fantasy, knowing nothing about this book, I feel like I would have figured out half of the plot twist. Also, I would have figured out at least half of the plot twist because of the way Tamlin acts, but I would have figured out different halves of the plot twist depending on whether I knew it was a romantasy or fantasy. And because the way Tamlin acts is it's a massive red flag, and also he has no charisma at all. He's like a stale bread surrounded by half like meat bread and some great bread on the outskirts of the basket, because Tamlin is just so stale, he's just so boring. I don't like reading about him. The fact that he's supposed to be like the love interest, for me just was so boring and concerning because he's a walking red flag. And then we have characters like the Serial, or now we met Rysand, who just have so much more charisma than them. Like Rysand, he's doing some questionable stuff at the part that I met, but just has so much more charisma than Tamlin, who is supposed to be one of the main characters in this book. And I'm like, God, why? It's just so boring. And overall, for most of the book, I was bored reading it. It does sometimes, there are moments where it holds my attention, especially after halfway through the book. The first half of the book I was bored and I was just continuing on because I know the plot twist, I know how this book will end, and I'm going to be honest, I went and I did read the last page of the book just confirmed that the spoilers that I got were real and that it was really going to end that way because of the way the book was progressing. I was questioning, truly, if I didn't know the spoilers for the beginning of the second book, I'm not sure if I would have continued reading this book. But for the first half it was quite boring, and then starting on the second half it started to get better, and I'm on the third act of the book and it's better. It's more entertaining for me, and the second half of the book definitely held my attention way more than the first half of the book. And overall, I'm having A Court of Thorns and Roses is kind of mid for me, because if I didn't know about one of the plot twists, I don't know if I would continue with the series, because so far most of it was kind of boring and I don't like Tamlin, and if Tamlin being the love interest, he's just such a massive walking red flag, and like at the same time I don't understand why Farah would like this guy. I would also understand because she's 19 years old and she was living a very poor family with no money, and she needed to hunt every day to live, to be able to continue living, and so she wouldn't starve to death. And they were always very hungry, and then comes this guy who takes her to live in a mansion and she has plenty of food all the time. I kind of understand why she would like him at first, but also no, thank you. I keep reading this book, and I have one of the problems that I have is not only that I don't like Tamlin, it's also because, for example, when I think of Tamlin, I keep wondering. I know there are a lot of people online that don't like blonde male main characters for some reason, especially in fantasy books. I remember once going to a bookstore and there was one of those post-it notes where the employee puts on a book, recommending the book, and they wrote, "He's blonde, but it's worth reading because it's a great book." And I think it was Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. And I read about Tamlin and I can't help but wonder, is he one of the reasons why people don't like blonde male main characters in fantasy, especially in books in general, but in fantasy books specifically, because he gave you the ick, and now people look at blonde male main characters in fantasy and they can think of Tamlin? Or maybe it was Prince Charming from Shrek 2, because he's also red flag and gives you the ick. And then we also have Amaranta in this book, and I can't help but picture her as the Queen of Hearts, more specifically Helena Bonham Carter's version of the Queen of Hearts in the Tim Burton adaptation of Alice in Wonderland. So I have these things. These are also things that kind of distract me from the plot. And I'm going to turn on the lights because it's getting dark. 1 minute. Or more like 1 second for you. But yes, that's what I'm thinking about A Court of Thorns and Roses. I stopped in a really good part, not a really good part, but an interesting part, and I want to see how the plot develops. I know exactly how this book will end. I want to see what happens, the details. Then I want to read the second book, because while reading this book, I ended up also spoiling a lot of other things with other books for me, which thankfully, I like spoilers, and I don't care for spoilers. I actually like spoilers. Again, I like spoilers. So, also, it's one of the reasons why I will continue reading the books, the series, because from what I spoiled myself, the other book seems to be more interesting, more entertaining, and better than A Court of Thorns and Roses. I'm going to finish reading this book. I know exactly what happens on the last page of this book because I already read it, and I don't like the ending of this book. But I'm going to continue reading, finish this book, and hopefully I will be able to pick up the next book in the series soon. I already have it on my DBR, so hopefully it won't take long to be able to pick A Court of Mist and Fury. So yes, let's stop rambling. Let's finish reading A Court of Thorns and Roses. Hello So I finished reading A Court of Thorns and Roses yesterday, shortly after I gave you the last update on this book, and the ending was better. There was one particular thing in the ending which was not the last scene. The last scene, I didn't like that one, but there's one particular scene in the end that I didn't know would be there, and I thought it was quite interesting and an interesting build-up for the plot twist in the second book, and now I'm even more excited to read the second book. But overall, A Court of Thorns and Roses, it was just a fine book. It was quite meh. There isn't something that I thought was super special about this book. The world building wasn't fascinating, the writing style wasn't something that I fell in love with, the characters itself. While I didn't love the main characters, I liked Farah, kind of, and there were some side characters that I thought were really interesting. But overall, A Court of Thorns and Roses as a single book, it's not something I'm in love with, it's not something I loved. I'm curious about the rest of the series, and especially about the second book, because I hear great things about the rest of the series. And if I didn't have the spoilers for what was going to happen in the next books, I'm not sure if I would continue the series, even though because of that there was one scene at the end, one scene that I didn't know would be in the end, that I thought was quite intriguing, and that one might have convinced me to continue reading the series, even if I didn't know the spoilers. But because I know the spoilers, and I already have the books on my TBR, I will be reading it. As you can tell, this is my TBR, which is getting quite extensive. A Court of Mist and Fury and A Court of books, the other Akodar books, they were in the back of my shelf because they were sequels, and I picked them up. I put them on the front piles. I put A Court of Mist and Fury and A Court of Frost and Starlight, which I think is the fourth book. The third book is somewhere here, but first I will read A Court of Mist and Fury, and then I might pick up the other one, because the other one is a hardback. It's quite chunky, so I have to read the second book, I'm keeping it on the back, but I already picked up A Court of Mist and Fury and put it on the front pile, so it will be easier to pick up whenever I want to, because I am really curious about what is going to happen in this one. Because also there was another plot twist that I didn't know. I was spoiled for 99% of A Court of Thorns and Roses, and there was a plot twist that I wasn't expecting. I had no idea what was going to happen, and then there was the one scene that I also had no idea what was going to happen, and it was one of my favorite scenes in the whole book. So I'm excited to get to the other books in the series. Let's put here like this, and my little angel will go on top. Now for the next book in this vlog. For the next book, I have some on my TBR. I was trying to look through my physical TBR because I'm in the mood to read some physical books for my physical TBR. I thought about picking up Ride by Ali Hazelwood, because that is kind of a romantasy, more like a parody. It doesn't take itself very seriously, but it is a romantasy. But I also was looking at my Kindle TBR, and there are some books that I think I need to pick up. The next one I'm going to pick up, I'm not going to start today because I just finished A Court of Thorns and Roses. I kind of like that book, and I don't want that one scene at the end of the book that made me really interested in the next book. I don't want A Court of Thorns and Roses to overshadow the next book, so I'm going to take like a few days off before I start reading the next book. But I decided to start Things Like Water. Is that the name? Let me see on the Kindle. Things Like Water. Where is the thing? I think it's in the back of my Kindle TBR. It's actually called The Things We Water by Mariana Zapata, and Mariana Zapata is an author I read from before, and I enjoyed her books. The books from this author that I read before I really enjoyed. And then last year she released the Things We Water, which is a romantasy. It's different from the other books that she wrote in the past, and because it's an author I liked the books of before, I was curious about it. But then I saw only a few reviews about this book. I didn't see many people reading it, at least not in my bubble or my corner of the internet. But the few reviews I saw about The Things We Water were not great. I haven't seen one single good review for this book, but it has been sitting on my Kindle TBR ever since it was released because it's on Kindle Unlimited, and I think it's time to read this book and just see whether it's good or not. Give it a try. I think it's also fairies and something about moving to a different realm, going from the human realm to the fairy realm. I'm not exactly sure what it is about, but I'm curious. I wonder if it is good or if it is as bad as the reviews that I read say it is. So we're going to start the Things with Water because I think it's been on sale on my Kindle TBR for quite some time and I want to read it and see what it is about. Hello, so I have a little update for you. We are going to do things a little bit different because I'm pretty sure, I'm like 100% sure that in the previous clip I said I was going to read Things with Water by Mariana Zapata and that I haven't heard the greatest reviews about this book. So then I decided to, it's better if I read the description and actually know what I'm getting into this book. And when I read the description, I don't think that would be the book for me, even though I did read multiple books by Mariana Zapata before and I enjoyed them. Just the premise of Things with Water I did enjoy. I think it was a mixture of urban fantasy where we have a main character where she goes to this farm who belongs to her best friend's brother, and I believe he might be a werewolf. And first of all, I don't like werewolves. I know a lot of people really like werewolves, but personally, I don't like romances relating to werewolves. Actually, when I see a romance relating to a werewolf, it actually puts me off because whenever I see a werewolf in a romance setting, everything I think about is how they probably smell. They smell like it's about to rain. But basically, when I think of werewolf in a romance setting, I just think about a smelly dog or like a wet dog smell sort of vibe. And for me, werewolves are not attractive at all because all I can think about is stinky dog. Sorry, I was interrupted by the alert, like the weather alert, that sometimes it pops up when it's about to rain a lot or it's raining a lot and it's not safe to be outside because it's raining a lot. I just got that alert, so I was interrupted for a bit. But basically, going back, I decided to not read Things with Water because the premise didn't sound very interesting. Also, the tone for that book felt kind of a more comedic, a more satire kind of romantasy, which I did read previous books by Mariana Zapata before, and it's for that reason that I can say, even though I really respect her as an author, I don't think our sense of humors align. I might have enjoyed previous books by the author before, but our sense of humors, they don't really align. There are things about her sense of humor that I just don't vibe with. So when it comes to it being the middle of a very slow burn romance, it works. But to read a full book that is supposed to be comedic, I had a feeling it probably wouldn't work with me. And also, besides werewolf and the comedic side, this book is 718 pages long. I wasn't ready to commit to read a 718 pages long book that I wasn't sure or that I had a feeling I wouldn't enjoy. So I decided to try something else. I went to look on my TBR, my physical TBR, my Kindle TBR, look for some books that I might enjoy on Kindle Unlimited, but I decided to stick with a book that is on my TBR, on my Kindle TBR, and in one side, it's kind of not what I wanted because it's fairies again, and I just read a book about fairies in this book. Ideally, I would like to read a book with a romantasy with a different kind of fantastical creature, but fairies are popular. Also, it's kind of a different vibe from Akotar, but I started reading The Rose Bargain, which is a YA romantasy. At least that's how it was advertised. That's what I know about the book. But basically, I'm only on chapter 3 of the book, so I'm going to tell you the premise of the book, and then let's talk a little bit about my first opinions, my first impressions about this book. The Rose Bargain takes place in this alternate universe where there is a fairy queen. Like the English queen is a fairy queen, and the immortal queen, she has been reigning England for centuries now. And then there is the human realm, there is the fairyland. The fairyland, humans don't really go there. But basically, in the story, we follow Ivy. She's the daughter of a marquess, but her family is kind of going bankrupt. They aren't doing the best financially, and to make things even worse, her sister recently, a few years ago, she ran away, and then one day she showed up again. And to make things even worse for the perspective of the family, her sister showed up all dirty. She didn't really remember much. The story that she told wasn't really matching up with the data people could get about where she was. Like, her story just wasn't, story didn't make sense, so no one was buying it. So her family is bankrupt, and their reputation is not great. And basically, we follow Ivy, who is the youngest daughter, and basically all hopes are on her to be able to save her family from doom, from impending doom, because they're about to lose their home, and she needs to find a good husband so she can save her family, and so she can have a chance of having a good future, a good, comfortable future. But that would probably be difficult considering the lack of money and the reputation of her family. And also the high society of London, of England at the time, they don't really like them, even though her mother grew up with these people, she grew up with these people. Because of their new reputation, because of the lack of money, people are now they're no longer really that welcome in society, so that makes things a little bit different. But basically, every year during the season, like, because this book takes place in 1878 in London, I believe it might be the summer, but every year there is the debutante season where the girls from high society will come out. Like Bridgerton vibes. If you watch Bridgerton, you probably know how it is, or how it probably will be portrayed in fiction. I didn't live in the 1800s in London, so I'm not 100% sure how those things went, but I predict it will go something like a Bridgerton debutante season, where they just come out and say hi and look pretty, trying to find a husband, because in the 1800s, that's what people thought that was the only purpose of women, which there are people today that still think like that. But basically, she's going out on the debutante season. And because this book takes place in a fantasy land, in the fairyland, and you have the fairy queen, the girls from the high society, they are expected to make a bargain with the queen, a fairy bargain, where a lot of them ask for shinier hair, to be prettier, to be taller, to have more talent. And our female main character, Ivy, she's getting ready and she's thinking about what bargain she will do with the queen and how to get, she expects to not be able to find a husband, but she's trying to mentally prepare on a way to maybe find a suitable husband. But from what I know, I believe the queen the queen has two sons. She has her fairy son, and then she has her stepson, which is kind of her adopted son. And I think she's trying to find a bride for the fairy son. And I think Ivy will join on the hunt for trying to marry the fairy son or something like that. We already met the human son. And if I had to guess, it would be she might have a romantasy, a romance with the human son. But I think it might be love triangle. They're teenagers, so it's young adults, they're teenagers, so a teenage love triangle sort of vibe, like the Vampire Diaries vibes. And I'm currently on chapter 3, and it is fine. Nothing groundbreaking. I'm curious about where it will lead, but also definitely I'm reading this book and I think, it's good. I understand why it is so popular. I think I might be slightly too old for it, because I'm no longer a teenager. I'm not a target audience. And while I can see that I think so far this is a good book, I am enjoying reading it, but I also have a feeling that I think that I have been having a lot of YA books, because this is what Like, I'm no longer the target audience. I'm in my late 20s. YA young adult is no longer a type sort of book that is written for me because I'm not the audience. And I've been reading some young adult books and I've been finding this like to be true. I read them and I'm like, oh, good book, great book. I understand why it is popular, but I might be a slightly too old for it. But let's continue reading The Rose Bargain because it's giving Bridgerton. Make it fairies, make it fantasy, vibes are interesting, the plot is interesting. Also, I think it doesn't help that right now, in my head, I would love to read A Court of Mist and Fury. I want to continue reading. I'm in the middle of so many series, and The Rose Bargain, I'm starting a new series. And in my head, when I want to continue reading all the series that I'm currently in the middle of, because I'm in the middle of so many series, and I want to read through them. I want to read A Court of Mist and Fury, and also there was another romantasy that I saw, which I think is called We Will Die, which is like Gladiator mixed the Vampire Diaries, and that one sounded really interesting, but I didn't want to buy a new book because I already have so many books. I'm grateful for having so many books on my TBR, but I do need to start reading through my TBR. So I think it's not helping for The Rose Bargain that in my mind, ideally, there would be these other two books when it comes to romance that I would like to read. But we are reading The Rose Bargain. We are going to finish reading, and I will be coming back when I have any thoughts about it. Also, as I said, it's about to rain. The light might be weird, even though it was supposed to be raining, but it is not raining. It has been windy for like the past half hour. Then it got really dark. Then I got an alert on my phone. But it is still not raining, so who knows what will happen. But weather is the kind of like perfect weather to just sit down and read it. Also, I'm filming this in the middle of Carnival. So Carnival and rain and just like perfect vibes for just sit down and binge reading a book. So let's get back to reading The Rose Bargain. I will be back when I have any thoughts about it. Hi, hello. So I'm currently 23% through reading The Rose Bargain, and I do have an update about this book, which is it's not that I'm not loving it, but I'm having some problems with the book, which mainly it is one that the chapters, they feel like they end so abruptly. It doesn't seem to have any specific reason why a chapter ends, any specific point for a chapter to end. Sometimes it just ends because it feels like they're trying to make some sort of cliffhanger, which for me isn't cliffhanging. Or sometimes it seems like the chapter is just ending because the author is trying to appease that book talk audience, that very specific book talk audience that says that they hate short chapters, so they're trying to keep the chapter short even when it doesn't make sense for the chapter to end that way. Or I don't know, sometimes the chapters just end in the middle of a scene and it makes zero sense why the chapter is ending in the middle of a scene. Another problem I'm having with this book is that sometimes it feels like the plot is some of the things that happen in the story, it was a little bit too convenient, so I'm not buying it because it just feels like too convenient and not like it is. I don't know how to explain. It just feels like some of the things that happens in the story are just a little bit too convenient for the plot and for the character, and I'm just not enjoying it. And the third problem I'm currently having with this book is with the main character, because she's feeling a little bit like and I'm a not like other girls sort of character, which I'm not enjoying it. I don't know. There's some things about this book that I'm not enjoying it. I can see why people would enjoy. If you like Bridgerton and romantasy and you haven't read this book yet, so far, it feels like something someone that loves Bridgerton and romantasy would enjoy, but just because it has that Regency era, debutante ball, this season in the 1800s in England with the high society, the British high society sort of vibe that Bridgerton has, especially in the first season of Bridgerton. mixed with fairies and mixed with fantasy, with a little bit more high stakes. So if you like romantasy and Bridgerton, you might enjoy it. There are some things about this book that I'm not loving, but I will continue to read because it is very fast-paced so far. It is easy to read. I'm getting through it quite fast. There are just some things that I'm not enjoying about the book. So let's continue reading, and then when I finish or when I have any other updates about the book, I will come back and talk about them with you. Hello, so I finished reading The Rose Bargain yesterday, but now I'm here to give you a final review because I could see it a little bit and I thought a little bit about the book and my thoughts about it. So let's talk about The Rose Bargain. In the previous clip, I was talking about some of the things I was struggling with this book, and some of them got better, others they stayed there, especially the part about the paragraph. I still do think that sometimes the paragraphs they do end in a point where it just didn't make sense for the not paragraph. What am I talking about? Sometimes the chapter, I was talking about how sometimes the chapter would end in a point that just didn't make sense for the chapter to end, and I think that continued throughout the book. There were many chapters where it ended, and I thought that maybe the chapter could have gone on for a couple more paragraphs or a couple more paragraphs of the new chapter, or just condensed into one single chapter instead of being suddenly you have kind of like cliffhanger, which isn't exactly a cliffhanger because the next chapter is right next to it, and basically the cliffhanger it's a continuation of the same scene. It just didn't make sense for me. Sometimes the point where a chapter would end, and that definitely continued on throughout the book. And there were other things that got better. At first I was thinking this book might be a little bit too predictable, but then there was a plot twist at the end of the book, which was a plot twist and really interesting. I'm curious about how the other book will fix what happened in this plot twist. We are going to talk about the second book a little bit later on in this clip. Let's continue on with some of my other thoughts about The Rose Bargain. It's just that I felt this way with many other books recently, especially young adult books or books that are really popular, where I look at it and I keep thinking to myself, is it me or is it the book? Is it just an age thing? And sometimes I feel like it's almost annoying when I say is it an age thing? Because I know I talked about it in a previous video. I don't know if that video I have already published or not, but I know I'm not old. But sometimes I read these books and there are books that I'm aware I'm not a target audience, like The Rose Bargain. I'm not a target audience for young adult novels anymore. But I just look at it and I'm like, is it an age thing? Because this book almost felt soapy at points. It was very meh. There were things about this book that I really enjoyed. I liked the vibes of this book, but there were others that it didn't work with me. Mainly that it felt very soapy and characters making not the wisest decisions, not doing the wisest thing they could have ever done, or just making dumb choices, let's be honest. But also this book was at times very entertaining, and overall, if you are a fan of Bridgerton, you need to read this book, because if you are a fan of Bridgerton and you like fantasy, please read this book, because this book, it felt like a perfect combination of the first 3 seasons of Bridgerton. It has the vibes from the first book of, the debutante ball, of the girls going out into the season, trying to get the best match, or competing sometimes for one specific match. Then you have that feeling from the second season where you have a sense of duty from one of the characters. You have a love triangle or a love arrow, except that in The Rose Bargain it's kind of a gender reverse version of that. Then you have the same vibes as the third season, in the sense that one of the characters is kind of coaching the other one on how to date, how to seduce. their crush, and but also like love just hits them in their face and they don't see it coming, but suddenly they just realize, whoa, I like this person, I'm in love with this person. So the Rose Bargain is the perfect combination of the vibes from the first 3 Bridgerton seasons, but make it fantasy. Again, it also takes place in England in 1878. I do like Bridgerton, but I read mostly for the... not read it. I watched Bridgerton mostly for the romance, not exactly because of the vibes. The vibes I don't care that much about. I just like the romance, I like the yearning from Bridgerton. So maybe that's one of the reasons, because this book is very vibe heavy when it comes to the vibes of 1800s debutante balls in the England. But if you like Bridgerton, I feel like this could be a great book for you. You can definitely go to a bookstore or just go to the Amazon website, because they let you read, I think, the first few chapters. They let you have a little taste for what the book, how it feels to read this book. So maybe give it a try, because I feel like for Bridgerton fans, this could be the perfect book. But for me, it just felt very middle of the road. It's not a bad book, but also not my favorite. I gave it a 3.5 stars. I liked one of the romances. The other one, I didn't buy it, and there were many things about the characters that they were doing, and I'm like, yeah, this is YA. But then there was one thing where I was thinking, is this YA? And then I needed to check if it was YA, because this book, technically it has smut, it's just that it's not one of those very graphic smut scenes that some books have. It's just a more... it's not long, it's quite short, it's more abstract, kind of. Not exactly abstract, but it is not as descriptive, it's not as graphic as the smut scenes in some other books. But technically it does still have smut, so I would argue maybe this is kind of an older YA, not a young YA, just for more older teenagers, kind of young adult vibes. But just to wrap this clip up, The Rose Bargain, it ended up being kind of middle of the road for me. There were things about it that I enjoyed, there were other things that just didn't work for me, but honestly, again, I feel like it might be a mixture of an age thing with a personal preference thing, with an upbringing thing, because I was looking through the ratings for this book, and the people that I follow on Goodreads, the ones that really love this book, they either fall in the category where this book, it has all those little details that just talks with a person, because there are some details, there are some things about a story that just talks to a person, and you make it more likely for someone to love a story, to give it a 5 stars. And this book does have some of those things that I know some of the people that gave 5 stars to this book, they like. But also there is not an upbringing thing, kind of, but also mostly also an age thing, because some people that gave it a 5 stars that completely loved it are also a little bit younger than me, not that much younger, but a little bit younger than me, so that adds to my feeling where the middle of the road might be an age thing. But overall, it was a meh book. I really liked the romance between one of the characters. The other one I didn't enjoy so much, but also there was a plot twist. I'm going to be honest, this book was a solid 3 stars until we got to the end, and then we have the plot twist, which I didn't see coming. The end of this book is so dramatic, and like, it was like a soap opera. A lot of the times reading this book felt like a soap opera. The only thing about the plot twist, though, is that I wish the book showed us a little bit more of the plot twist instead of telling us about the plot twist, because the plot twist, basically, we start getting the plot twist, and then we figure out what's going on, and then we found out something about one of the characters. And then we move to another chapter from the point of view of another character that's basically just telling us what the plot twist is, what actually is going on, instead of just showing us what actually the plot twist is. I feel like I'm rambling right now, but let's wrap this up. The Rose Bark ended up being a 3.5 stars. In terms of the sequel, turns out this book, I thought it would be a series, but it is just a duology, so there is only one book left, which will be released in a few months, I believe, from the time I'm filming this. On the time I'm filming this video, the book isn't out yet, but the second book isn't out yet, but it will be released. In terms of whether or not I will continue to read it, I was kind of thinking to sit on it a little bit before I decide whether or not I was going to continue reading series. But because it is only a duology, I think I might. It's not one of those series where I'm desperate to read the sequel and I want to pick it up the moment it is released. It's definitely one that I can wait a little bit to read the sequel. But if it was a longer series, I would definitely be sitting on it and thinking about whether or not I would want to continue reading this series. But because it is only a duology, I think I will read the second book in the series, the second and final book in the series. It's just not one I'm very excited about, but I'm curious about how some of the things that happened at the end of the Rose Bargain will wrap up. So yes, that's it for this video of reading Romantasy, Read Only Romantasy. If you have any great Romantasy suggestions, please let me know in the comment section, because I want to read more Romantasy, but sometimes I don't know if I have like a very specific taste, but sometimes it's very hit or miss for me so far. Romantasy, it's very hit or miss. So if you have any suggestions, please let me know in the comment section. And if you like this video, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel so you can get more bookish videos on your subscription box. And I hope to see you with another one very, very soon. Bye!